couple of things before we get started. You guys can go ahead and sit down. Again, we are live streaming and recording this. And so if you know somebody that wasn't able to attend, lead them to our Rumble channel right here, and you'll be able to see it. So, and follow us there and like us if you would. I want to take a minute to actually say thanks, a big-hearted thanks to David, Tara, and Taylor Rail of the Snake River Event Center. They were very supportive for us over the past 5 years, and we're very, very sorry about what has happened. Just to be clear, the shutting down of the Shiloh and the Snake River Event Center was not any of their doing at all. The Shiloh has been going through bankruptcy for over about 6 years, I believe it is. And last Tuesday, the bank came in and actually shut the hotel part down. The hotel was managed by corporate, Shiloh corporate and all that, but they shut the hotel down. And unfortunately, even though David had a lease on the event center that was valid, he also, part of that lease included the restaurant and lounge back there, and it shut off all access to those things, which is a major revenue source for him. Plus the water and electricity was all tied into him. So unfortunately, even though his business was steady and actually even growing, the actions that happened to the Shiloh and what Shiloh corporate did has caused him to shut down. So I'd just like to take a moment and give them a big hand and whatnot, and for actually supporting Stand Up for Idaho for the last several years. So please give them a big hand. And if you see them, please wish them well, because they really deserve it. And I also want to reach out and give a big thanks to the West Bank for accommodating us in such short notice. I mean, it was just a scramble to do things. And as it stands right now, we will be here through May, for the rest of May. June, there's some scheduling conflicts and whatnot, so we'll figure out what's going to go on there. But we're looking for a home, somewhat of a permanent home, and all that. So we'll keep y'all posted there. But on that aspect, let's give the West Bank a big hand too, for actually bending over for us on that. I think it's great. So I appreciate everybody's support. A couple of things too. Again, it is the America 250. 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We have a flag here. This is a one-of-a-kind carved wooden flag that we're raffling off for Stand Up for Idaho. It's a fundraiser for us. We are a nonprofit. We don't charge you to come into these things. We don't do anything like that, other than just if you can donate to the jar, that would be fine. We'd really love it. But if you're interested in a raffle, ticket for this is $20, and we'll be willing to sell you 1 or 1,000, so whatever works. And we will draw that at about the 4th of July of this year for the raffle. Another thing that we're doing is we've actually teamed up with KID 106.3 a little bit, and we do a historical minute on their show, on their station, whatnot, that they play throughout the day and throughout the week, telling us a little bit about what happened 250 years ago. And then every Thursday at 5 o'clock on the Jolene Thomas Show on KID 106 News Radio 106.3. There's a long title. Anyway, there's a segment that and we have some ladies here actually go on Jolene's show and talk about what happened 250 years ago. And so I'd like to give Jolene and KID a big hand for supporting us and and the America 250. Now, the one thing that I noticed the other day, I was at another club. I actually belong to the Exchange Club of Idaho Falls, and they put up if you're familiar with the Memorial Day flags that they put up in Freeman Park here, there's 1,000 flags that they put up there. They're a great organization. There was a member there that had a bunch of brand new 50-cent pieces. And these are the pictures of them. And if you look at them, it says 1776, 2026. and that's good. But what really caught my eye is if you look what's on the back of them. It says knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. And that's on the back of the new 50-cent piece. And that actually says a lot, and that resonated with me really well, because that's what Stand Up for Idaho is about. It's trying to give you the knowledge of things, to understand what's going on, because you need to know that to protect your liberty. Okay, so I thought that was very unique, and I'm glad to see that happen, and I'm glad to see actually our country, our nation, recognize that as a fact, to be able to put it on a coin. Okay? All right, so real quick, next week, what we're having is actually throughout this last little while, we've had several candidate forums and whatnot, but there aren't enough Wednesdays in the week or Wednesdays in the month to be able to handle everything. And so next week, we're going to have actually a candidate meet and greet. It'll be here. And we've invited all the Republican candidates that are for the contested races in the legislative districts 32, 33, and 35. We've invited them all to come here, and there'll be a little bit of a meet and greet. We'll let them, whomever comes, we'll give them an opportunity to stand up here, give them about 5 minutes to tell us why they're wonderful and everything, and why we should vote for them. I like saying it like that. And then when they're all done, we're just basically going to just have an open house, okay, and let the people just come and meet the candidates and talk to them themselves. We won't have a question and answer session like we normally do, because hopefully we'll have too many candidates to actually make it work meaningful to do those things. But it'll give you a chance to at least stop and one-on-one talk to the candidates that are running in your district. So I invite you all to be here, and we're not going to make this a habit, but there will be some light refreshments. So we may bring some cookies. So we appreciate you coming. Okay, tonight actually we'll get on to tonight's show forum. Tonight's a candidate forum for the U.S. House of Representative candidates. Okay, this is all candidates running for a House of Representatives, and this is U.S. House of Representatives. District 2 were invited to come. Now, and this is for the Republican Party. The Republican Party candidates, Brian Keene, he's out of Twin Falls, and Perry Shumway from Rexburg, said they could make it, and obviously they're here. We did get a hold of Mike Simpson's office and whatnot. He said he had prior commitments and unfortunately couldn't be here. And that's okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Jolynn Thomas, and she's going to be our moderator for tonight. And we're going to give these guys a few minutes to tell us why they're wonderful, why we should vote for them, and then we're going to turn it over to you to ask the questions. And right now, I'm going to turn it over to Jolynn. So let's give Jolynn a big hand, everybody. Thank you. That should work. Don't fall off.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. This is such a great opportunity to gather and learn more about these important elections, and they are certainly coming up quickly. So without any further ado, we'll get right down to it, but I really encourage you to come up and ask your questions. If you'll just come right up when we give you the cue to come on up, and then Rod right here is going to be giving the time cues for our candidates. So when you're almost out of time, you'll see that yellow. And then when it's time to stop, you'll see the red. And we'll start with our opening statements, then we'll do the questions. If there is a need, if there is a candidate mentioned directly, they'll get a rebuttal. And if you have a couple of questions, feel free to just keep coming back up. So let's get started, and we'll start right here with you, Perry.
Thank you, Jolynn. I'm Perry Shumway. I guess it says that here. And I'm very glad to be here. Thank you all for coming out for Stand Up for Idaho. It looks like at this point we're all sitting down for Idaho, but I suppose that's okay. I am running against Mike Simpson and Brian Keene if it were if I had to choose between those two, I'd totally choose Brian over Mike Simpson. Mike Simpson has been in for 27 years now. He's been a politician for 46 years nonstop, and he's never lost an election. 2 years till now. Yeah, thank you. 2 years ago, the Idaho primary, Republican primary, was also in May, and Mike Simpson won. There were 198 members of the House who ran for re-election at that time. And at least in that primary election, of the 198 who ran, 196 of them won. That's a 99% primary election re-election rate. And the two that didn't win, there were odd circumstances that made it so that they couldn't win. If it hadn't been for those circumstances, it would have been essentially a 100% re-election rate. The founders set up this nation so that members of the House have to run for re-election every 2 years. And that, I think, was very intentional. It was on purpose. What good is that doing if these people are getting re-elected at 97, 98, 99% rate? Something is broken there, especially because national surveys are often taken that show approval of Congress at 10, 12, 15%. So, 15% of us approve of them, but somehow 99% of them get reelected, including Mike Simpson. I've never met him. I'm sure he's not a horrible guy, but there are plenty of things that he has voted for that I would have voted differently on. In particular, the ones that are hardest for me are bills that increase the national debt. I feel like it's a very dangerous place that Congress has put our country in, needlessly. It doesn't have to be that way. If I'm elected to this office, I will never, ever vote for any bill or any budget that adds even $1 to the national debt. Will not do that. That's a hard no for me. There are lots of things in place that make it so that incumbents win re-election again and again and again. I certainly favor term limits, but that's just one of many things that I would love to do as a member of Congress to make it less likely that these incumbents will get reelected again and again. I feel like that is a significant problem. It's not the only problem in our nation, but it's a big one. And it's not one that lots of people are talking about or willing to tackle right now, but there are specific things that can be done. If we had time, but I think I'll get a yellow card if I blab for too long here. If we had time, I could tell you some specific ideas I have to do that. So anyway, I'm running because I want to make it so that incumbents don't just automatically get ushered back in, but that they actually have to fight for their positions and have to convince the voters, and that challengers have a chance to beat them. I think that would be a good thing for our country. And I'm running because I am more conservative than Mike Simpson in terms of federal spending, federal outreach, the national debt. So that is why I hope that you'll support me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Perry. And Brian, go ahead and do your opening statement, if you would.
Okay, first I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I'm Brian Keene. I grew up on a farm between Meridian and Kuna, Idaho, so kind of on the west side. But when I retired from the Army and came back home, I found that Meridian was way too big. I didn't like it anymore, and ended up settling in Twin Falls because it's a small town, kind of like Meridian is, which puts me on this side of the state. However, growing up in Meridian, I actually grew up with Russ Fulcher, the other congressman from Idaho. In fact, he was a very good friend in high school, and then we also attended Boise State together. I think that he's great, and understand that for decades I had immense respect for Mike Simpson, but I've lost that in the last 4 or 5 years. I simply don't like the direction that he's going, and don't like that he can't make up his mind which direction to go. That when Democrats are in power, he just kind of works with the Democrats and thinks that's great, and when Republicans are in power, he just suddenly kisses up to the Republicans and doesn't really kind of remember what Idaho is. Earlier, just last week, Perry and I had a chance to interview with the Idaho Statesman, and one of the questions they asked me was, how do you think that your constituents view this certain question. And I was taken aback for a moment because I don't think of you as my constituents. I think of you as my neighbors. Maybe what we really need is for a congressman to live in the same district that they work in, which is why one of the things that I have proposed is a legislative accountability amendment, which is an actual amendment to the Constitution, to not require Congress to vote in the Capitol, but to allow us to live and work in our own districts with our own neighbors, where it's easy for our neighbors to come and see us when they need to. And we can vote online. We have lots of ways to conduct Zoom meetings. You know, if corporations can do business all over the world through Zoom meetings and can take votes through Zoom meetings, Congress should be able to do the same thing. But we need to represent our neighbors by living amongst our neighbors and by listening to our neighbors. We need to not be listening to Washington lobbyists. We need to not be going to Washington and think that we represent our party or think that we represent whichever company just came and give us the biggest check instead of representing the people who sent us there. That's a concern for me. We are facing not just the Republican Party, but the Republican Party a lot more than the Democrat Party this year. We're facing the opportunity. We're facing the likelihood that we're going to take a huge beating in this election. Okay, Republicans are not going to win the midterms. We're solid in Idaho. The Republican Party is going to win Idaho. Whoever wins the primary election in the next 2 weeks is going to be the congressman next year. But the rest of the country is not that way. President Trump had, in a poll in October, had a 36% approval rating. That's dropped to 34% in the last few days. And it's dropped to about 25% with the young voters, the 18 to 26-year-olds. Okay, that's going to be a hard sell for us. About a month ago, Kurt Bardella, a long-term Republican strategist, said that the Iran war and the gas prices could be an extinction-level event for the Republican Party. Okay, that's pretty alarmist. I don't think it's an extinction-level event, but we're going to take a beating. And that beating is not just going to hit us in 2026, it's going to hit us in 2028 as well. If we don't have a strong Republican in Washington who is, number one, capable of standing up for Idaho's best interests, but number two, is capable of actually working with Democrats without necessarily becoming a Democrat. And I know. I know what that sounds like, and yes, that's exactly what I meant. You know, when Mike Simpson is talking to a Democrat, he becomes a Democrat. When he's talking to a Republican, he becomes a Republican. We don't know what he's going to do. He's a chameleon. And that's a concern for me. Growing up on a farm, of course, I have some strong opinions about farming and some strong opinions about water. These are things that Mike Simpson and I disagree on. I'm here to help represent you. I'm Brian Keene, and I need your help and support to fight Washington insiders and Washington lobbyists. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. And your questions, come on up to the microphone.
Thank you for both you gentlemen coming out, and thanks to Stand Up for Idaho for putting this on. Okay, actually, Brian set me up pretty good. This is a question I was planning on asking anyway, but just saying the local politicians going around, Butch Otter, still can't get him out of my head, Brad Little, he's been doing quite a bit campaigning, and after touting his many grand virtues, which he has some, one of the things he does mention, he mentions he's got endorsed by President Trump, and like you yourself just said, President Trump's level has not been particularly high in national polls lately. It probably hasn't affected Idaho that much, but that still doesn't change the fact that his polling is down. So my question is to both you gentlemen, I would like you to answer it. You can arm wrestle for who goes first or not, don't matter to me. But
We'll have Brian go first since Perry started with the opening.
Okay, my question would be, at this point with that, how much would you value and esteem and an endorsement from President Trump at this point?
sadly giving his low approval and his health slipping, I fear that an endorsement from Donald Trump is a kiss of death. I think that it would be terrible. I support the Republican principles. I support conservative principles. I don't believe that Donald Trump is the best representative of those principles right now. Maybe a couple of years ago he was better off, but in the this entire term he has done very, very poorly. One of the things that concerns me the most is this Iran war. I fought in 2 wars myself. I fought in 2 wars in Iraq, spent 32 years in the military, 2 years active duty Navy, 30 years in the Army Reserve. Of those 30 years in the Army Reserve, I spent about 8 of them on active duty, fighting in 2 wars and training troops that went to war. My oldest son is a lieutenant colonel in the Army, still in the Army. He's a doctor in the Army, so I don't believe that he's going to be actually fighting the war, but when his tour in Afghanistan, he was taking care of soldiers that were injured. I'm just very concerned that Iran war is a bad idea. I think that we're risking lives for no particular reason. I think that we're causing more economic problems instead of protecting our way of life, which is what our military is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be protecting our way of life, and I think that he's sacrificing it. So as much as I hate the idea of attacking another Republican, I do not think that President Trump is a good fit for us at present. I think that it's a mistake to continue to back him, and I think that it's a mistake to back the people that he backs.
Thank you. And Perry, same question to you.
Okay. I'm pretty sure President Trump has already endorsed Mike Simpson. Mike Simpson at least says that he has, so I assume that that's accurate. I am not entirely sure how powerful or meaningful endorsements are, but maybe they pull some weight. I know yesterday there were primaries in, I think, Ohio and Indiana, is that right, where a number of Trump-backed candidates won the Republican primaries in those states. So, and maybe it was the backing of the president, maybe it wasn't. There have been plenty of things that the president has done that I have disagreed with. But if I were elected to this position, everything that the president proposed, which was right, I'd be happy to vote yes on. But if it were something that increased the national debt or otherwise was immoral or unconstitutional or wrong, I would not be ashamed to vote no. I'm pretty sure he never would endorse me. But if he did, I wouldn't disown that or something, because there are things that he's done that I'd like to. So.
All right. Thank you, Perry. And let's move on to another question from the audience. Come on up.
In today's world, especially in politics, thank you, we're fighting over the dangest things, but we're just people. You guys, Brian and Perry, we're having a great conversation, yet you're opponents. But if we work together, the sum of the whole is greater than the number of the parts. How could you bring opposing parties together?
All right, and since we started with Brian, we'll go ahead and start with Perry on this question.
Okay, thank you for that question. I love the idea of opposing parties coming together, bipartisanship, but I will say that much mischief, many shenanigans have happened over the years under the banner of bipartisanship. Just because it's bipartisan doesn't make it good, and often, in my opinion, much of the bad that Congress has done over the years has been bipartisan. That's not to say that it's bad for Republicans and Democrats to work together if they come up with something that's good, but just because it's bipartisan doesn't mean that it's better or necessarily good, and in the end, whatever laws are enacted, bills are passed, things are signed into law, years later, whether it was done in a spirit of cooperation or antagonism, whether it was people getting along, kumbaya, or people mad at each other. What will matter is the content of those laws that were passed, as opposed to what process was undertaken to get the laws passed. So it's not that I think that working together in bipartisanship and getting along is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I know myself personally, I'm not a super, combative, in your face kind of a person. It's not my personality. I'm happy to work with people that have different viewpoints, that are reasonable and rational. But in the end, it's about the content of the legislation, not the process by which it became legislation. So.
All right, thank you. And Brian, same question to you.
Okay, thank you. Perry and I both agree that there is a huge problem with the deficit and the national debt. The national debt has grown from approximately $5 trillion when Mike Simpson went into office to over 40 trillion, or to nearly 40 trillion. It will be over 40 trillion by the end of this year. The last truly great bipartisan bill that I remember, and of course I was a much younger man then, was Graham-Rudman. And it was a bipartisan bill that was aimed at balancing the budget, reducing the deficit, and paying off the national debt. It forced Ronald Reagan, the last year of his second term, to actually discuss increasing taxes, even though he refused to do it. And then it forced George Bush to increase taxes to balance the budget because they had bipartisan support. To me, bipartisan support is a huge thing, not simply because of the support, but when you take the time to negotiate with your opponents, so to speak, you usually arrive at a better solution. It's almost like going to marriage counseling. You go in, you think you're right, and the other person's wrong. But the more you talk about it, the more you listen, the more you learn, you sometimes discover that the other person knew some things that you didn't know. And once in a while, by listening, that other person gets to hear some things that you knew that they didn't know that you knew. And you arrive at a better plan. So to me, bipartisanship is building a better plan. And so I agree with Perry that I do not want to vote for a bad plan just because it's bipartisan. But if talking to the other side helps us build a better plan, we need to pursue that.
All right, thank you. And next question.
Thanks for coming. What are your views, both of you, this is for both of you, on what we should do about sanctuary cities and now sanctuary states? It's tearing our country apart. I think we need to, I favor mass deportations, but obviously that's leading to some problems. So I'd like to hear your views.
Okay, and we'll begin with you, Brian.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that you started with the mention of the sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. I grew up on a farm. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We worked with a lot of migrant farm workers. It was kind of a big part of our business, was being able to bring in migrant farm workers. Most of those migrant farm workers were, of course, here legally. Some were not, but we used a lot of migrant workers. And so the migrant workers, even the legal ones and sometimes the illegal ones, would get mixed in, and we wouldn't know until they got there. I think that in order to really, truly address this problem, we need a better system for tracking the legals so that we know where the illegals are. If we took all of those legitimate workers, those legitimate farm workers, and got full biometrics, eye scans, fingerprints, and that, so that we knew where they were, then the people that didn't have those fingerprints and eye scans that we used to identify them, we would know that they were illegal, and it would be a lot easier and more efficient to round them up. Because I want those legitimate workers to be here. Our farmers need it. Our economy needs it. We need those legitimate workers. We need to do everything we can to help them. So we need to improve our legal immigration process in order to tighten up how we handle the illegals. And the other thing is that when we get the legal migrants on our side, a lot of times they're the ones that help us round up the illegals because they don't want the illegals here either. They don't want criminals mixed in with their workers. They don't want criminals mixed in with their families. They will actually help us round up and get rid of those criminals. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Perry, same question.
I'm sympathetic to your desire to have mass deportations. Any sanctuary city that is in violation of federal immigration law needs to be held accountable by the federal government, should not be harboring illegal people or inhibiting ICE from doing its job, its function. We need to be supportive of federal immigration efforts, not fighting against them. But I hate the idea of federal government, telling specific cities what they can and can't do within their own populations. I love the idea of local government making choices, but when it comes to federal immigration law, then it is different. I am 100% in favor of securing our borders completely, and I think ICE does a very important job for our nation. I'm not a big fan of rounding up masses of people who are here illegally and sending them all away without knowing who they are. Anybody who's here illegally who has any kind of a criminal record, I'm more than happy with sending them away. But people who are here and who are contributing to the economy and who are good citizens who have never broken the law other than when they crossed the border, they broke the law then, of course, or they overstayed their visas. I'm less excited about forcibly sending them back, particular that, here in Idaho, we need a lot of them for our agriculture, labor, and so on. It's a difficult one. For my church, I was a missionary many years ago and Spanish speaking in Los Angeles, and 100% of the people that I worked with were all illegals, and I loved them, and they were wonderful, and they were here because they wanted to work and contribute. So I'm a bit torn, but I'm very supportive of ICE.
All right, thank you. And who is ready for the next question?
Well, I have heard nothing that would dissuade me from voting from either one of you today. So I like that, but the trouble I see is that with an incumbent and the favor that the incumbency gives to a candidate, I question, did either one of you know the other was going to file to run before you filed? And so that only one person would be challenging him instead of two, because frankly, I think two has no chance.
Great question. Yep.
Okay. That's an excellent point. I love that. I would love for there to be federal law saying that for elections like this one, there has to be a runoff within a party so that there's only one person running against the incumbent in every case. I think that would be very fair and would make it so that incumbents would have to fight a little bit harder. I did not know that Brian was running. I don't think you knew that I was running. So by the time we both found out, it was probably a little bit late in the process to throw in the gloves at that point. But yeah, and we are quite a bit different, he and I. So it's probably good that we're both here. But I would love it if we could have a runoff between the two of us, and then the winner of that then go against Mike Simpson. To me, that would be a much more meaningful way to do this process. That's one of many advantages that incumbents get. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Perry. And Brian, to you.
This certain question, I guess whoever answers it first gets the answer for everybody, because I have to agree with Perry. I am very concerned about going up against an incumbent. When I started this to run for this office, I was actually planning on pulling together a committee and running for the state legislature. But too many things came up in the last, basically since about last August. Too many things came up with Mike Simpson that the more I looked at it, I kept thinking, even if I lose because I wasn't prepared to run this year, I've still got to put my name on the ballot, and I have still got to put my ideas out there, because something has got to be done to either stop this guy or slow him down and irritate him a little bit. I did not know Perry was running. In fact, Perry and I have had a chance to meet a couple of times before now, and even though we differ on two or three, I don't want to call them major things, two or three minor things, we agree on the major things. And the major things are that Mike Simpson is simply not doing the job. He's been so far removed from Idaho for so long that he's no longer representing us. He's representing the lobbyists in Washington. And because he's representing the lobbyists, he switches parties whenever it's convenient. He works with the Democrats when that's convenient. He works with the Republicans when that's convenient. And it's all tied to who is paying for him at that moment. And that's another one of the reasons that I'm pushing for the legislative accountability amendment that I talked about earlier, of requiring the Congress representatives to live in their district and work in their district. I need to hear from you guys every day, not from lobbyists and not from the president.
All right. Thank you very much. Next question.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming, and thank you, Brian, for your service. There's a lot of talk about taxes, but there will be 73 million Americans in 2030 that are over 65. And it's projected by 2034, the Social Security Trust Fund's going to be running out of money. And you don't hear anybody talking about that, and it's already late to do something about it, but something needs to be done, and it needs to be done soon. What do you think should be done to rectify that problem?
All right, and we'll begin with you, Brian, on this one.
I get to go first. Yeah, I get to go first this time. If you haven't had a chance to pick up one of my flyers yet, I would encourage you to do that. There is an amendment that I proposed, the Stable Maintenance and Responsible Taxation, or SMART amendment, which specifically addresses that idea. Presently, because the national debt is so severe, if you look back at history, almost every problem that we face today, we have faced at least once before. Most of them we faced at least once in the last 100 years. The national debt is so extreme that it is roughly 125% of our GDP. At the end of World War II, we faced a similar problem. Our national debt was approximately 120% of our GDP, so right around that same range. Well, the answer at that time was to raise taxes on everybody to pay down that debt. I find that to be very problematic, because who is everybody? Well, that's us. That's you and me. That's my kids, my grandkids, your grandkids. However, if we look at part of that history, if we were to simply raise the taxes on corporations and the top 1%, that would pay back part of that debt. But the other thing that would do is that would encourage the economy, because most of these rich people don't want to pay taxes. So the way they avoid paying taxes is they report lower income. And the way that they can report lower income is by reinvesting their income in their companies, or reinvesting their income in churches, charities, their employees, their families, gifts, things like that. And then those people end up paying the taxes, because they can't escape the taxes like the corporations do. Thank you.
All right. Same question, Perry.
I know that Social Security is heading towards a cliff. And many of us, myself included, are counting on that Social Security check when we retire. It's a huge problem. Significant, serious problem. Cannot be avoided. It's been dodged for so many years, I think. So in the short term, things are going to have to happen. They've talked about increasing the age at which people can retire, and younger people, not older people, supposedly. They've talked about increasing the income level at which Social Security is taken out of people's paychecks. I understand all those things. Maybe some of those things might have to happen. But for me, and this might not be the most popular opinion in this room, but Social Security is not remotely constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that says our government should be in the business of setting aside retirement for our citizens. We could amend the Constitution and say there should be Social Security, and if we did that, I might have a different view. I'm not saying we should just, stop it tomorrow. people like me, like you, I'm sure, have paid into it all of our lives. We need to get out of it what we've put into it, for sure. I totally get that and agree with that. But I would love to see Social Security phased out over time. I would love to have it become optional eventually, and finally have it disappear or become privatized. The government doesn't need to be in the business of providing for retirement for American citizens. We are smart enough and capable of doing that on our own. So I would love to have Social Security eventually go away. But between now and then, the people who have paid into it would need to, in one way or another, get paid back what they put into it. So.
All right, next question.
Okay, Mr. Shumway, I was a little concerned about your suggestion that the federal government come in and regulate runoffs in elections, because as I understand the Constitution, that's up to the states. And one of the things that make me super nervous about the people in Washington, D.C. is they always want to come in and trump on our rights and do not uphold the Constitution. So would you not agree that that might be an overstep by the federal government?
Let's see, you, yeah.
Maybe so. If it were, then we would need a constitutional amendment to make it happen. Whether it happened at the state level or the federal level, I just would love for laws that make it so that incumbents have less of a re-election rate or less of a chance to get shooed in. But if it were unconstitutional, and I don't know enough to know whether that particular provision, whether Congress would have the power to mandate the states do that or not, and if not, then maybe it would require an amendment, and it might be an amendment that had multiple provisions, and that might just be one of them. I, like you, hate the idea of Washington telling states what we can and cannot do, but I also hate the idea of Washington or states setting it up so that incumbents always win. So it's kind of a catch-22.
All right, thank you. And Brian?
I agree that I would not want the federal government taking even one more thing than they already have, because that is so much, there's so much out of line. I would almost like to see our state require a primary candidate debate the week before early voting starts. Require everybody to come to that debate, and whoever doesn't come to that debate isn't on the ballot. You know, imagine if Mike Simpson had to be here today and had to face us. How much different would the results be? Would he still have the advantage of being able to outpaper us and outmoney us? No, because he'd be on record with what he said. Now, there's nothing to prevent the state of Idaho from saying, hey, in order to be on the primary ballot, you have to stand up to the debate. And that way, the candidate that only pays $300 for their filing fee and the candidate that has $2 million in the bank both have to show up to that debate.
All right, next question.
Do you know what, both of you, do you know what an Article 5 convention is? And do you support or oppose one? And why or why not?
Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah, it is mine.
it's
Right,
Brian.
this time. I do not support the idea of having another convention. Am I okay with amendments being done as necessary? Yes, but to have a constitutional convention and wipe out the entire thing, no. Our Constitution is easily the best document, not only that was available at the time, but I believe the best document still standing. And one of the things that makes our Constitution so much stronger than the constitutions of any other country is the fact that it can be amended, but that it requires voter participation. Congress can't amend it by themselves. They can vote something, they can put it out there, but then every single state legislature has to vote on it as well. And if it's not carried by the majority of the state legislatures, it doesn't pass. And so the voters then have to work on their own state legislatures to push to get it amended. So I would absolutely oppose a constitutional convention. I think that that would be horrific to abandon 250 years, well, 237 years of history, because the the Constitution wasn't written until 1787.
Yeah, the problem with a convention of the states is that the language in Article 5 is very vague in terms of what that would look like. And Congress, even if all the state legislatures say we require a convention of the states, Congress has to convene that convention of the states, not the legislatures. And so Congress, theoretically, is in the driver's seat in terms of deciding what that's going to look like, who's going to attend. For example, they could say, you know, we're going to have 52 people from California and just 2 from Idaho in this convention. There's no precedent that would say, no, you can't do it that way. It could very much favor elements or things that we, those of us who want to amend or change the Constitution, would be opposed to. And so it could become a runaway train in a dangerous way. So I'm opposed to a convention of the states, even though the founders set that up as a remedy to the current, you know, deadlock that we have when Congress won't pass a balanced budget amendment or a term limits amendment. So it's frustrating to me. So what I would love to do would be to introduce a new amendment as a member of Congress, because the roadblock is who gets to propose or introduce a new amendment? Only Congress, unless we have a convention of the states. The states can't do that unless they have a convention. So I would love another amendment, I know this is complicated, that would say if 3/4 of the state legislatures, 38 of the states, vote in favor of an identically worded amendment to the Constitution without having a convention of the states, just if their legislatures support that, then that would be forced to be voted on by Congress. And if 2/3 of both bodies of Congress passed it, it would become an amendment to the Constitution without the danger of a convention of the states and without having to wait for Congress to propose or originate this thing.
All right, thank you. Let's get another question from the audience.
Well, I'm trying to decide which question to ask. Sounds like you're really similar in your thoughts and ideologies. I guess I'll ask this one. Of the Idaho legislative candidates right now, or incumbents, who do you most closely align with? And I'd like to have you name 3.
Yeah,
I lost track.
Oh,
Okay.
you first.
yeah, you finished, so you're first.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. It would be a lot easier to name 3 that I don't align with. 3 that I align with. I don't think I can. I don't align with a whole lot of them. I'm sorry to say. I only know the ones in my own area, and they are very far from the ideal candidate to me. So I'm sorry about that. There are others that I've read about who are in the Boise area, but I can't recall their names because I'm not voting for them. They're not on my ballot. Sorry about that. I'm more focused on federal stuff than state stuff, so I can't think of those names. I can tell you federal people that I align with.
No, I'm interested in Idaho. I can just ask you if you like Kerry Hanks or Rod Furness.
Yeah, so even there, I know both of those names. I actually looked up Rod Furness today, his voting record, and it seemed like on spending issues, a lot of his voting was different than what I would have hoped for. But I don't know Kerry Hanks's voting record off the top of my head. But I'm guessing probably I would lean towards her instead of him, I think.
Okay,
Don't
thank
hold me
you.
to that. I'm sorry. That's a bad answer, but yeah.
And
An
Brian.
honest answer.
To be quite honest, I do not know the state candidates in your part of the state, but I can address the ones in my part of the state. Of the incumbents in my part of the state, I like Josh Gobe. One of the opponents, or one of the new incomers, the new candidates that I really like is Brent Ranke. I've known him for 40 years, and I think that he's going to be great, but I can't remember who he's running against. But and I apologize, I can only get to two. I was out of state for several years with the Army, and so I honestly don't.
I can tell you who Ranke's opponent is. It's Glenita Zeiderveld.
Definitely Ranke.
Okay, Ranke.
All right, let's go with the next question.
First, a comment. Local politics is what affects everybody immediately. Federal politics affects everybody, but it takes time. I would highly encourage everybody, even you two, to know who is running in your district, because it makes a difference. Okay? I need to make another comment. This is a primary election. And this is where the party chooses its nominee. And I guess the question would be is, do you agree with that? Okay. And then that nominee goes on to the general. So shouldn't it be an open... I'll just comment. It was made that there should be some laws or whatnot to force debates, to force these type things. Do you believe that a party, I guess would say this, is a private organization? Yes or no? Therefore, do they have their own rules, and can they run their own rules? Yes or no? And therefore, also, can they hold a party member that claims to be a Republican, Democrat, or whatnot accountable to the party platform? And do they have the right, and I know I got several things here, to actually expel that candidate or that individual that does not uphold that party platform?
And I get to deal with this one first. I'm glad that you put it that way. I really am. It's something I hadn't considered. You know, we talked about Perry talking about having the federal government kind of mandate a runoff, and then I talked about the state government kind of mandating a debate. And it really hadn't occurred to me. It would have been a whole lot better to do it your way. It would have been a whole lot better for the party to demand a debate. I would love to see the party say that, hey, we're going to have a debate, and you're not going to even appear on either the primary ballot or the general ballot unless you come to the debate and win the debate and get the party blessing. Absolutely. And yes, should the party be able to hold individuals accountable for lying? Absolutely. Dishonesty is a horrible thing. Especially in politics where people are kind of naturally dishonest anyway. You need to be able to know that they're being dishonest about the right things. And that's a joke. I'm not trying to excuse dishonesty. Oh.
It's a good question, and I hate to come across as like I want the strong arm of the federal government to squeeze that party and force it to do this or that or the other thing. I hate that approach. But yes, a party is a private organization. It certainly has the right to decide who its candidates are going to be and the form by which it decides who those candidates should be. But parties already have to conform to all kinds of rules and regulations at the federal level and at the state level. So what I'm talking about, it's one more, and would it be better if there were fewer regulations on parties instead of more? Maybe that would make our elections better. All I know is incumbents have lots of advantages, and if we don't change something, they're going to continue to have those advantages. And I think even members of the party get frustrated with that and wish that it weren't that way. So maybe a a federal law requiring runoffs is not the right thing. Maybe that's the federal government telling parties how to do their own business. I understand that concern. I would be open to alternatives to that, for sure. I hate the idea of the federal government telling local people anything about how we can and can't do our stuff. But it is a problem. Somehow it needs to be fixed, in my opinion.
All right.
Just to follow up. I'm breaking some of my own rules, but I get to do that. Yeah. Okay. Now this is a simple yes or no question. Okay. There's a party platform. Okay. And we'll pick on Mr. Simpson because he's not here. Let's just say that he's not abiding by that party platform. Does the Idaho Republican Party have the right to say that Mike Simpson is not a Republican? Yes or no?
I wish that you hadn't said that as a yes or no question. Should they say he's not a Republican? Absolutely. Does anybody have the right to tell somebody else what they can call themselves? No, absolutely not. It's a hard yes or no question.
I'm gonna throw this out, and this is it okay for me to say that I'm a Freemason when I am not? Does
It's
that
unethical.
organization have a right?
It's unethical, but do I have the right to say that you're not? I don't, because it's not my ethics, and I don't have the facts. I don't know.
But the party or the Masons have the right, likely have the legal right to persecute me for claiming something that I am not.
On that, I'll agree. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I completely agree with the idea that the Republican Party, through its own mechanism, can say Mike Simpson is not a Republican. They can't say that about me, but they can about him. No, I'm kidding. Absolutely, yes. I don't think the Republican Party has the right or the power or the ability to remove him from office. But to say he's no longer a Republican and that when he comes up for re-election in 2 years, he can't run as a Republican, 100% yes. Likewise, if you say you're a Freemason and you're not, that is wrong, against the law. So, yeah.
And just for clarification, I view my questions actually as any party, whether it be Democrat, Libertarian, Republican, whatever it may be. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. And next question.
While we're addressing the idea of having a party that has a candidate, or rather that has a platform, I guess the question is, when is that platform set? It changes from year to year, and so it looks to me it would be very hard to say this is the platform, because in 2 years it might be completely different. And so I guess I'm a little bit concerned about that approach. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. As part of my candidacy, I have read the Idaho Republican platform, and I signed the pledge saying that I agree to it and agree to uphold it, to live by it. I was surprised when I read it that there were some parts that I thought this is really poorly worded, and there were some grammar errors, and I thought this can't be a big picture, long-term, formal document like the Declaration of Independence or something. And indeed it's not. It gets amended and changed from time to time, and I'm okay with that. You know, things change, times change, people change. My pledge was to uphold that platform at the time that I read it, and I was okay with the things that were in it. There were some things that were little, I don't want to say goofy, but just like, you know, does that mean what I think it means? But I think I understood it well enough to feel at peace with, yes, I can sign this and say that I support it. If it changes in a few years, then I shouldn't be held to a future one that has different wording unless I've read it again and signed off on it again. So
The party website, when you register as a candidate, requires that you certify that you've read and agree to the party platform, and it requires that every time. And so, as I read through it this year, yes, I signed it. I agreed to it. And even Perry, I know, did, and even Mike Simpson, in order to be on the ballot, had to sign that, saying that he agreed to that party platform. So if he didn't agree to that party platform, but he signed it anyway, that's an ethical issue. So I agree that we should require the candidates to sign that again every 2 years, or every time that they run. Every time that they run, they should be required to sign that again. I also enjoyed, I believe it was Ada County, actually Elmore County did it too. Not all the counties submitted or sent stuff to me, but I remember on Ada and Elmore County both that I had to fill out a questionnaire specifically going through all of the planks on the platform and answering questions about which parts I agreed with and which parts I didn't agree with. And that, to me, having to go through every plank and verify that I agreed with that, forced me not only to review the entire thing, but it also, there was one that was very, very unclear, and I took the time to write up what my concerns were. And I don't know if that cost me anything with Ada County, because Ada County didn't endorse anybody, so I don't know. But I appreciated having to answer those questions, because going through the entire plank and verifying what I agreed with and what I had concerns with forced me to stick to my own ethics and to state clear what it was that I was concerned about.
All right, next question.
I'd just like to have you reveal the thing that you didn't disagree with about. Disagree with the thing that you didn't agree with in the Republican platform.
Well, it's not that I didn't agree. It was in the health and welfare plank, and there was a question about abortion, which I really didn't like the way that it was worded, because it stated that life begins at conception. Well, I'm a biologist by trade. I know that over half of fertilized eggs don't implant, which means that the mother never even knew that she conceived. On what planet can we hold a woman accountable for having conceived and lost a pregnancy before she even found out that she was pregnant? And so I had a concern with the way that was worded, and that it should have been verified with medical personnel.
Would you accept the wording, life begins at the moment of implantation?
Yes, because that would be more clear.
Oh, did you want him to address that as well, or? Oh, because, well, you didn't disagree with it, so, yeah, so we'll just go on to the next question.
Hi, I'll admit it's kind of a fluff question, but still it's something I'm interested in. Perry, when you was talking earlier, when you was talking about the incumbency advantage, you said in the primaries the incumbent won 99% of the time. And just, you're welcome to answer this too, Brian, if you know the answer. Perry may not, I don't know. But you said the incumbent won 99% of the time. In the primaries, I'm just curious if you know how much that carried over to the general and how many times the incumbent won in the general. I can't imagine it's 99%.
I think it was 97 last time.
You're pretty sure
It was
you're
high
back?
90s.
Okay.
I honestly don't know. I know it's extremely high. I know it's almost always in the mid to high 90s. I did not look at the last time specifically. That's more Perry's issue, and but yeah, I know it's always been in the mid to high 90s, and that's very concerning. But I could not give you exact numbers, and I won't lie and claim I did or claim I can.
Okay, Anyone else? Next question.
I wouldn't vote for Mike Simpson if he was the last person on earth. So one of you two will be getting my vote. And I'm just curious what you're going to do to act differently than he has for the last 27 years.
Let's see. Yeah, you were the last one. So.
Well, I can guarantee I'm going to do almost everything different than Mike Simpson. I'll tell you that. I was campaigning for Richard Nixon before I was old enough to vote, and then I voted for Ronald Reagan. And yet a few years ago I had a chance to work with Jimmy Carter and with his son Jack Carter. I can work with Democrats and Republicans both. But I'm not going to magically become a Democrat just because there happen to be two Democrats standing in front of me and only one other Republican. That's just not going to happen. I will not waffle. I will do what I believe to be best. If the other party comes up with a good idea, I'm absolutely going to support that good idea. If my party comes up with a bad idea, I'm absolutely going to oppose that bad idea. But I'm not going to jump on board with the other party just because they're in power. If they have a good idea, I'm going to help them. If they're in power but have a bad idea, I'm going to fight them. And that's going to be different than Mike Simpson. In fact, that's what I think most concerned me about him the last few years. I was concerned about the Columbia Basin River Project where he wanted to breach the dams. I as a biologist, I understand the importance of that water, not just to our farmers, but also to the wildlife, to the forestry, the habitats that are set up there now. To pretend that breaching the dams is going to somehow restore that habitat to what it used to be 120 years ago is ridiculous. We need to protect the habitat that exists now. We need to protect the animals that live there now. We need to protect the farmers that rely on that. We need to protect our economy. Caving to the other side is not excusable. And then last summer when he caved to our side and proposed sneaking an amendment into an Interior Department bill to rename the Kennedy Center, and of course at the time I thought, well, that's ridiculous, they're never going to go for that. I was wrong. They did go for it.
All right, Perry, same question.
Okay. Since you are definitely not voting for Mike Simpson, you're probably less interested in what I would do that's different from him, which is virtually everything, but rather maybe some of the differences between me and Brian. So I will try to put those into words just a little bit, and then I would love, if it's okay with Jolene, for Brian, I hate to put words in his mouth, so if he wants to rebut what I say, I welcome that if that's fair. So
yes, we'll give Brian a rebuttal.
That's good. That's good. I would characterize, I think that we're similar in a lot of ways, but we are different in a basic approach to the size and scope and reach of federal government. I'm not saying that he loves size and scope and reach of federal government, but if you had to compare us both in terms of how we're going to vote, I'm probably the guy who's much more in favor of eliminating or phasing out certain federal departments, phasing out things like Social Security, maybe Medicare and Medicaid, cutting way, way back on military spending, like way back. So I am very much a fiscal conservative in terms of wanting to make the government very, very small compared to how it is now. And I think that Brian is a little bit less that way than I am. So I hate to characterize your position. You feel free to, but I think, in terms of like healthcare, for example, in U.S. healthcare, there are a lot of free market reforms that I would love to see put into place. And I think Brian is no fan of like the Affordable Care Act or any of that kind of stuff. But I would probably go further in terms of removing the requirement for medical schools to have to be certified or doctors to have to be licensed and certified. I would go for a pure free market approach where he might be a little bit more like, no, we need some of those things in place. So.
All right, and a rebuttal for Brian.
I'm going to say guilty as charged. I don't like the federal government doing a lot of the things that they do. There's no question about that. But Social Security, I think, was a necessity, and I think it was a necessity at the time. If you consider what happened after the stock market crash in 1929, a lot of people who had properly invested in their homes, in their retirements, in their businesses, lost everything and had no way to survive. The federal government is a little bit more stable than that. If we have a certain share of our investments, for instance, Social Security, in the federal government, we should be able to count on those investments staying strong and staying protected. So I am a supporter of Social Security for that reason. I'm also, my oldest son is a medical doctor in the Army. I'm a biologist. I've trained about 100 doctors and probably over 1,000 nurses. And I am a firm believer that we need standards for training. To me, to have medical schools being able to issue degrees without clear requirements, clear, consistent requirements, is a formula for disaster. So I disagree with Perry on that. Overall, I think that we could easily be friends. We wouldn't be drinking buddies because we're both LDS, so we don't drink. But we could easily be friends. But on those two issues, I absolutely agree that we do not agree. And that's okay for us to not agree, because I think we can discuss those things intelligently and rationally.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Next question.
Okay, you said that you would not vote for bad ideas, but you vote for good ideas. I want to know how you define bad ideas, because I can tell you the Democrats think they've got good ideas, and I don't agree with them. So how are you going to how am I going to know what you mean, both of you, by a bad idea or a good idea?
Yeah, obviously, everybody thinks their own idea is a good idea. But I can tell you right now that not every idea that's come out of the Republican Party has been a good idea. Okay, we've had bad ideas get put forward. Not every idea that comes out of the Democrats has been a bad idea. They've had good ideas get put forward. Graham Rudman was bipartisan. It worked well, and it should have stayed in effect. In fact, had it stayed in effect, instead of having a national debt of almost $40 trillion today, it would be a little bit more manageable. It would probably be in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 trillion, because it was about 5 trillion 30 years ago, and it's nearly 40 trillion now. That bipartisan plan was a good plan. Bipartisan plans can work, but what constitutes a good idea depends on whether it's effective and whether it's worthwhile. And I'm not going to fall for everything just because the other side said, or just because my side said it. I'm going to analyze exactly what they said and analyze those costs and discuss those costs and negotiate with them. And if they've got a good idea that isn't quite right, I'm hoping that we can negotiate to make it a better idea. Because a lot of times, if I go in thinking one thing is absolutely the best, and the other side comes in thinking, no, their thing is absolutely the best, often that discussion leads us to develop a plan that was actually better than what either one of us had. And so if I go in there thinking, hey, my party's absolutely right, and no matter what the other party says, we're just going to ignore them or we're going to fight, nothing's going to get accomplished. It's going to be like a playground fight. You can't expect 435 toddlers to be able to do anything effective in our government. You need 435 adults who are capable of rational discussion and analyzing facts.
So I agree with you that everybody thinks that their ideas are good ideas. And good ideas, to me, in the context of this discussion tonight, have to do with the role of the government. And so to me, good ideas are grounded in a correct and proper understanding of what the role of the government is and is not, what it should and should not be doing, as opposed to saying this is a good idea because it's going to be really effective or it's going to work really well. Everybody thinks their stuff's going to work really well. That's not a good way to judge in terms of federal law. So I think of the concept of rule of law, that people love to bandy that around, and they use that term to say nobody's above the law. But rule of law really means that the law of the land is the thing that we have to adhere to and stick to, and that is the Constitution. And there's a whole lot of stuff that the federal government is doing right now because people thought it was good ideas that has nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution does not authorize it. It's not in the Constitution. But they look at very broad clauses like the General Welfare Clause or the Interstate Commerce Clause, and they say that, you know, all this is justified. If the things that exist in the federal government are justified by those clauses, then we should just take that document and crumple it up and throw it in the garbage. It doesn't mean anything then. We need to stick to the role of government as defined in the Constitution, and we're not doing that now. And so good ideas need to start there, in my opinion.
Right. Next question.
I doubt there, I doubt there's anybody in the room that would say that the national debt is acceptable. So since we all probably agree on that point, what can we actually, or could you actually physically do? What measures would you support in order to bring that debt down, realizing that we have been living off of our children's and our grandchildren's future, and it will be a change to our cost, our standard of living, in order to attack that?
The national debt to me is sort of like some kids standing in the middle of a busy freeway with cars and trucks whizzing by at 80 miles an hour, and they're saying, "We haven't gotten hit yet. We're fine, Mom. Don't make us get off the freeway. Everything's fine." It's a train wreck that's about to happen that could devastate our economy in ways that we've maybe never seen, not even in the Great Depression. It's super precipitous and dangerous for us. And survey after survey shows that a very large majority of Americans support a balanced budget amendment. Lots of states have those already, including Idaho. The federal government does not. People like Mike Simpson say that they support that, and then they go and vote for things that increase the national debt by trillions of dollars. It's very ironic. As long as it's up to Congress to introduce an amendment to the Constitution that requires them to balance their budget, it probably is never going to happen. So this thing that I was talking about a few questions back, where without a convention of the states, we could still have a mechanism where state legislatures could pass an identically worded amendment, in this case a balanced budget amendment, and that would force members of Congress to have to vote on it, and nobody in Congress wants to go on the record as being against a balanced budget amendment. They all say that they want it, like Mike Simpson does. He would have to vote yes, and he would, I'm sure, if it actually came to a vote. So a concrete thing that I could do would be to propose that kind of an amendment process, which would require an amendment to the Constitution, which would be initiated by me as a member of Congress. It's the only way to do it. So,
if you had a chance to see my flyer, I mentioned this already, but I'm going to go ahead and read just a couple lines out of two proposed amendments that I've actually already written up. Now, I expect that if I win this election and go to Congress, that there are going to be people who are going to argue with me, and we're going to have to debate, and we're probably going to renegotiate some of these. But my proposed stable maintenance and responsible taxation, or SMART amendment, S-M-A-R-T, basically establishes, and it's an amendment because it has to be permanent, okay? It establishes a 10-year tax plan where middle class and the poor cannot see an increase in taxes for at least 10 years, but that there is every year a slight increase on corporations and the top 1%. Again, back to what we had at the end of World War II, where we recognized that that national debt was going to destroy our country. And I do not want them to raise taxes on everybody, but I'm okay with them raising taxes on corporations and that top 1%, because most of those people are not actually going to pay those taxes. What they're going to do is they're going to feed the economy by reinvesting their money to avoid paying the taxes, and then everybody else is going to still end up paying those taxes. But we eventually pay that debt down. The other thing is my proposed balanced budget amendment. And again, that has to be an amendment because it has to be permanent. Because if we just pass a bill, in 2 years a new Congress comes in and they turn around and they pass pass a new bill to get rid of the old bill. Okay, it has to be an amendment because it has to be permanent. It has to be something that is a guiding principle, a governing principle, not a temporary law or a temporary approach. And it actually sets timelines that before March 1st, the House of Representatives shall present a balanced budget, that before May 1st, the Senate shall present a balanced budget. And by July 1st, the president has to sign that budget. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Well, I'm for getting the government out of my life, as most people are. So I just wondered what you think about, I supposedly Trump got rid of the Department of Education. I don't know if that really went anywhere. And I think education should be local. I don't think the feds should be in that. I'm not for the feds being in healthcare at all, insurance, all those things that affect us, I believe should be locally. So how do you feel about getting rid of the federal government out of our lives?
Yeah.
Boy, this one would have been Terry's. Or it would have been Perry's. I'm sorry. I call you Terry. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, this would have been Perry's question. I'm opposed to the federal government getting involved in anything they don't belong involved in. But one of the things that the and it's right in the beginning of the Constitution. I mean, right from the beginning, we don't expect the federal government to tell us what to do, but we do expect the federal government to protect us from other powers and from each other. And so I would not be in favor of eliminating the federal government because we kind of want that protection for them to protect us from other people trying to tell us what to do or other countries trying to tell us what to do. But we definitely need to keep that power in check. And so I would be 100% supportive of making sure that the three branches are accountable to each other like it was intended by the Founding Fathers, and they are accountable to us and accountable to their oaths of office.
Department of Education started under President Jimmy Carter, and because of it, American education is top-notch now. No, I'm kidding. I don't know what we would do without it. Doge, President Trump's effort to reduce some government positions and spending and so on was very controversial and supposedly gutted the Department of Education, but my understanding is that all of the student loan programs just got shifted over to the Small Business Administration. They're still there. It's still a thing. So it's a bit of smoke and mirrors, a bit of a shell game to me. It was more than a little frustrating. I was hoping that more than that would happen. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that the federal government has any business telling states or sending money or making loans or anything related to education or healthcare or 100 other things that it's involved in. So I think we are brother and sister on this, that we feel the same way. I think that it's just always better for local government or the private market to do these things. It's just always, always, always is worse when it's done at the federal level. It's just, it's never efficient, it's never effective, it's full of corruption. It makes no sense for us to send, billions of tax dollars to Washington, D.C. so that people like Mike Simpson then can decide how much they're going to send back to Idaho versus Florida versus California. It's ridiculous. We shouldn't be sending it there in the first place. But I would never support a tax cut without accompanying cut in government. I would never support that. So.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Can you name 3 things in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution that the legislative branch is given authority by we the people to do?
Okay, Section 8 specifically. I know Article 1 is legislative, Article 2 is executive, Article 3 is judicial. I know that the House is in charge of creating the budget, the purse strings. I don't know if that's in Section 8 specifically, but that's certainly a duty of the House. The Senate has duties like confirming presidential appointments and judicial appointments, House has the duty to declare war. I don't know if all these are in Section 8. Yeah, you're going to get me in trouble. That's an excellent question. Let me go over to that table for about 5 minutes and I'll tell you. There are copies of the Constitution over there if anybody wants. Yeah. Am I good? Did I get some of those? Oh, no, she's still looking it up. Don't tell anybody if I got those wrong. Thank you. I think we both need these. Thank you. That's great.
Okay, I'm not going to cheat and peek, but I am going to tell you because I already read my balanced budget amendment. Okay, Congress does have the power to tax. They have the power to set the budget. They have the power to regulate commerce. And those are critical. In fact, that's the reason that when I put together the balanced budget amendment, that I specifically said that first deadline has to fall on the House, because that's where taxation and budget starts, is in the House. So that first deadline has to fall on the House. We can't have them wait until October to make the budget and then have a government shutdown because they didn't bother doing their job, and then blame the president because they didn't do their job. It is the House's job to establish that budget, and that should be their first item of business. When they report to work on January 6th, they should be nailing down the rules and nailing down the budget first thing. They shouldn't be arguing about who gets to do this, who gets to do that, and then, wait several months later and in October say, oh, no, we're going to have a government shutdown because we never bothered to do our job.
Actually, I kind of like shutdowns. It keeps them out of our lives. So there have been dozens of balanced budget laws passed, and the Constitution specifically states in the 10th Amendment that anything not specifically in the Constitution is left to the states. And yet, look at how well they obey that. So please tell me how passing a balanced budget amendment would make a difference. They ignore the laws we have now and the laws they make. And I'm trying to understand how a balanced budget amendment would do anything.
Well, that's part of the reason that I say it needs to be an amendment, because laws are temporary. You pass a bill, and 2 years later, the next Congress can pass another bill and get rid of the one you just passed. It needs to be an amendment so that it is permanent and it's a guiding principle. But in addition to that, we also need people of honor and ethics that are going to abide by those amendments. And if they don't, we need accountability. And I also wrote in fact, if you look at my flyer, a legislative accountability amendment. I say throw them out. If they're not doing their job, we need to throw them out. And we need to throw them out a whole lot faster. We need to not have this process where we wait 2 years until the next election. If they refuse to submit a balanced budget by March 1st, shut Capitol Hill down, send them all home, have a new election in July to return a new Congress. We need accountability at all levels, especially in the legislature. You think about the Congress. You think about Congress. It's got about a 15% approval rating and an 80% disapproval rating. That's because they're not doing their job. Every single one of us knows they're not doing their job. Yet, as Perry pointed out, every time the elections come up, we keep voting the same people back in, and we think they're somehow going to start doing their job. No, they're not.
One of my favorite parts of the Bill of Rights is in the 10th Amendment, where it says anything that's not specifically laid out here is reserved for the states. I love that, and I do agree with you that that is ignored, at least in terms of the way that I interpret it. Somebody could argue, I suppose, that it's a little bit vague in its wording, or it's not really clear what it says. So I think that just makes a stronger argument that if there is a balanced budget amendment, it's going to have to be very, very clear, very specific and explicit in its language. And the Supreme Court then would have to back it up if it's ever challenged. If Congress, wants to do an end run around it or circumvent it or something, then the Supreme Court would have to have the backbone to say, that is unconstitutional. You have to go back to the drawing board and make a budget that is balanced. So.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Okay, so I like balancing my own budget. So that's a good thing. However, I see a problem with it if we have a balanced budget mandate, because if the government doesn't stick to the 18 things that they're allowed to do, that we give them authority to do in Article 1, Section 8, then by a balanced budget, we have to, because of all the spending, we have to raise taxes. So it's mandated to balance the budget. So that's a problem for me. So how are you going to, I don't know, I guess require that the government stick by the things that they can spend money on, and so that you really don't need a balanced budget if you stick with the authorized things in the Constitution?
Let's see, who was last?
Yeah, we can arm wrestle for it. I think that various proposed amendments to the Constitution to balance the budget over the years have had override provisions, like 2/3 of the House and Senate could override it if they have to, and I'm leery of those things because I don't want too many openings where Congress can play games and, you know, circumvent the whole idea, the whole reason for the balanced budget amendment in the first place. I just now glanced through this because you held us to the fire, which was a great question. The things that are laid out in Section 8 there, and in my view, the cost of doing those specific things compared to what government is doing right now is maybe, 10% or something. It's tiny compared to all of the things that government is doing that are not in that Section 8 that are really expensive. So of all the things that are going to keep me up at night, worrying that the government's not going to have enough money to do the things in Section 8 here, that's pretty low on my list, I think. Not a huge concern. And balanced budget amendments could have emergency provisions if we're at war or whatever, then this or that overrides it. So those things are a possibility. But whether I would want to go for that remains to be seen.
Well, my question really was, how are you going to make the government accountable to their spending?
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Well, I guess we're asking the same question.
Well, part of the reason that, and again, I'm going to refer back to my flyer. I actually proposed a bill of accountability, which includes 6 proposed amendments. Now, I'm hoping that there's no need for all 6, but that all 6 get discussed. Because the first one is a legislative accountability amendment. That's to hold the legislature or the Congress accountable. The second is a judicial accountability amendment to hold the Supreme Court accountable. The third is a presidential accountability amendment to hold the president accountable. The fourth is balanced budget amendment. The fifth, the SMART amendment, the taxation amendment. And the sixth one is actually a personhood amendment. And the reason that I think those need to be amendments is they need to be permanent guiding principles. But with specific regard to this question, putting the balanced budget amendment and the SMART amendment side by side as partner amendments requires, number one, that balanced budget. Number two, that taxes stay stable for at least 10 years or until such time that the national debt is less than 25% of the gross domestic product. I think that is critical because it's easy to spend money when you think you have money. It's easy, at least from a congressman's standpoint, because they get millions of dollars and it's not their money. It's easy to say, oh, well, if we want this, we'll just raise taxes. But if you have these 2 amendments partnered side by side that says you have to balance the budget, but you can't raise taxes unless it's done in this certain order or this certain steps, I think that's going to put some limits on that. And I think that then, if they fail to do it, we go back to that first amendment, that legislative accountability amendment. Get them out of there.
All right. Thank you. Next question.
I'm going to change the topic a little bit. Idaho has a vast, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, millions of acres of federal public lands. What's your perception? And there's a big push, nationally and whatnot, to actually get rid of those public lands. I guess I would say turn them over to the state, divest the federal government of those lands and whatnot. What's your position on those and why?
I'm glad I get this one first. Idaho, I'm going to say that again, Idaho has these millions of acres of land. Idaho has these millions of acres of land. The federal government has paperwork that says it belongs to the federal government. Idaho has this land. Idaho should be running this land with federal support, not the other way around. The federal government should not be running this land and telling Idaho to pay for it. So, no, that land needs to be managed by Idaho with appropriate federal support. I mean, if the federal government has certain programs that have to be there, they need to pay for those. But overall, no, that should be under our control. That should be controlled by the state of Idaho, and should be protected. I grew up in Idaho. I grew up on a farm. I grew up hunting and fishing. I want my children and my grandchildren, and heaven forbid, great-grandchildren. Three of my granddaughters, one graduated from high school last year, and two of them graduate this year. So let's hope that I'm at least 15 so years before before I become a great-grandpa. But I want my great-grandchildren to have those lands. I want them to have those experiences that I had.
I think it was last year that, the state of Utah has an even bigger housing problem than we have in Idaho. And Senator Mike Lee, a guy that I agree with on a lot of things, but he came out with a proposal to transfer a bunch of BLM land to the state so that they could then sell it to private developers so they could build more housing to help with the housing crisis. And that was just so universally hated by the people of Utah. And then they did a survey in Idaho, and I think it was like 96% of respondents said, don't touch our federal land. We want public access to our hunting and fishing and camping and hiking forever. I totally understand that sentiment, and because there is such a strong feeling that way, I agree with it. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that we should have any federal involvement in national parks or BLM or any of those kinds of things. So it bothers me that that is not constitutional. And I think that we should amend the Constitution, and we should talk as a nation about, do we need any kind of environmental protection? Do we need national park system and so on? And make those things become legitimate and define what they should look like. But in terms of transferring all of the federally owned land either to the state or to private interests, I'm really opposed to that, just because it's not like I think the federal government is the perfect steward or that they manage everything in a wonderful or super efficient way necessarily. But if there's anything on which the people have spoken, the message I get loud and clear is, don't touch our federal lands. We like it how it is. We like our access how it is now. I get that. I respect it. I just want it to be constitutional.
I just have a question, comment, trying to remember my history. But at one time, wasn't there a thing called Louisiana Purchase that the federal government of the United States bought and therefore owns everything west of the Mississippi? Well, I mean, they own. Was there a point, and then they allowed territories to occur and things like this? Was there a point really that Idaho purchased or obtained the right to those lands from the federal government.
It's mine first, I think. I think Idaho itself was not part of the Louisiana Purchase. It was part of a separate purchase. But yes, there was shortly, it was either during or shortly after the Civil War, the establishment of land grants, where Idaho was established as a land grant. So that land was given to Idaho under the borders of Idaho. I don't know whether how the federal government retained ownership of the parts that they retained ownership with when the land grant was to be the entire state of Idaho, granted to the state of Idaho. So I would have to spend some time reading over the documents. It's been years since I've read those. Like most of you here, that was probably high school the last time I spent time reading those documents, and then it was just enough to get past the government test so that I could go play basketball.
I don't know the answer to your question either. In terms of federal policy, I don't feel this huge compelling need to stop having federal forests, national forests in Idaho, or to change the national parks, or to even BLM land, as long as there's open public access. It's just not a huge, like, oh, we've got to change that. It's not a big issue to me. What really does matter is that I want people to be able to access it continually the way they do now. Who paid for it 150 years ago or something, I don't know. And maybe there's an issue there. I'd be glad to learn more about it, but it's not high on my list of priorities.
Okay, I appreciate that and everything. Like I say, I don't know what it is. I was like, I barely got past government. Okay, so I would say I was probably a solid less than average student. Okay, so but my comment really is there's a lot of complexity when if you're in Washington D.C. and a lot of push, there's a lot of complexity about how did we get here, and that is a knowledge that hopefully you would have, and what are the nuances in there. I was actually listening to a lady yesterday, and she is from Tennessee originally, and they have 2% of their land is public, and she and her parents, would go camping and all of that, and she didn't realize it as a child, but her parents were able to do that only because Tennessee has a lottery system. You wanted to go camping or whatnot, you had to get a lottery, and whatnot, because otherwise you were having to go into private property and pay to do that. So it was a lottery system, and they moved here, and oh my goodness, I can from standing right here within a matter of an hour, I can be out to wherever and enjoy Mother Nature, and so. Again, that's one of the things, like you say. Public lands is something that actually makes Idaho, Idaho. And I hear a big push of we need to do something different with those public lands. And we need to be cautious. And just a comment is Harriman State Park. There was some local recent changes in the state legislature that we have that potentially affect Harriman State Park. And how will that affect Idaho and us? That's just a comment. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and then Jillian. You can
Maybe with just a little bit of a surveying background, I can address that land use, because when the federal government, either by acquisition from the Louisiana Purchase, east of the Continental Divide, or from the agreement with the Great Britain on the division of the Northwest, or the war with Mexico on the Southwest, basically took ownership of those lands. The land grant divided the lands, or said they could be divided into townships and ranges. Each township and range is 36 square miles nominally. and sections 16 and 36, out of those 36, only 2 of them were granted to the states for public education purposes. And so they belong to the state. If you look at a Forest Service map, you look at a BLM map, especially BLM, you'll notice there will be 2 little blue squares out of 36. And that's the lands that were granted to the state. The rest of them were federal lands. When my grandparents homesteaded up above Birch Creek back in 1914, the grant for that land was from the federal government. And that's the same with all land that was people went out and just proved up on their it was a federal thing. Just to kind of throw that in, it might help for some of your other discussions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I definitely need to learn more about this. I think the problem that people are worried about, mentioning the camping and things and losing the ability to go out and use the public lands, I think they're worried about it if it becomes state. But isn't there a way, and maybe you could look into this, that we could take those federal public lands and national parks and stuff and make them state parks and let the state control them as state public lands instead of national?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could totally see us doing something like that. And I totally get the idea that if it's our own state running these lands, we can do it better and we can do it in a way that favors Idahoans more. So I understand that. I just, if I were ever to support something like that, I would need ironclad guarantees that we would never sell it to private interests that would then limit access to the public. That's the most important thing to me. So.
And I would defer to the 10th Amendment. I absolutely support the idea that Idaho should control those lands and that it should be controlled by the state, which means that, yes, the state legislature is accountable for that, and the state legislature should then designate those as state parks to protect them.
Next question.
Hi, I've got to change the topic for you folks, so. It's like, looks really good. Okay. My question has to do with programmable money and how you see that you can protect the citizens of Idaho from being forced to have a digital ID, a digital money system that's programmable money that actually attaches to every single citizen and invades their right of privacy.
My money, I believe, still says it's legal tender, doesn't it? This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Period. I think being forced into programmable money is like being forced into a specific stock. I think that it's criminal. And I think that we need to fight to protect against that. That we have a national money system for a reason. Prior to the Civil War, we had several different banks issuing their own money. And during the Civil War, many of those banks disappeared, which meant that that money was useless. I hate the idea of a private company or a foreign government manufacturing money that then the U.S. is forced to use, because we don't have the security in that we have in our own money. So no, I would absolutely fight against forced programmable tender or forced programmable money.
Yeah.
Perry.
Okay. And I agree. Just glancing quickly through Section 8, because you
Congress has the power to coin.
the power to coin money is a specific responsibility and duty and power, authority of Congress. And therefore, Congress should be, and constitutionally is required to be, heavily involved in that. And so, as much as I'm opposed to federal regulation of lots of different areas, in terms of currency and money, I don't have a problem with avoiding that pitfall that you mentioned. So yeah. Right. And that was the administration, right? Was that Congress that did that? I think it was
I think it was another
executive power, right?
Orders.
An executive order, which I think is not constitutional. So should have been Congress that did that.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight and for all the good questions. Thank you to both of our candidates, Perry and Brian. Let's give them a round of applause. And we are going to allow them a closing statement. So because we started with Perry, we'll start with Brian on the closing statement.
Okay. So I guess Perry gets to play the role of my wife tonight. He get the first word and the last word. I thoroughly enjoyed being here tonight. As I mentioned earlier, it's hard. Even if I win this, it would be hard for me to consider the people of Idaho as my constituents, because you are not going to be my constituents. You are still going to be my neighbors. I can't imagine demoting a neighbor to constituent. It's like losing track of what your priorities are. My priorities are Idaho. I need your help to defeat the powers in Washington that are fighting against us. I need your help to support Idaho values and support American values. I'm Brian Keene, and I'm asking for your vote and for your support.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I won't blab too long. I only have 3 minutes, so. It's been a very interesting night. I've been to a number of these things, and these questions were by far the best and the most challenging that I've faced so far, and I love that. That's fantastic. People like us should totally be, held to accountability for what we're doing. So thank you for doing that. I know there are several things that I want to go back and do some homework on now and maybe be a little bit better prepared for the next one, which is great. That's how it should be. Congressman Simpson 5 years ago proposed breaching 4 dams on the lower Snake River to save or to make it so that more salmon come into our state in the annual salmon runs. That was very controversial. There are lots of people that have issues relating to, the reservoirs and water usage, and many valid points, many valid concerns. The thing that was amazing to me was that his proposal cost, this is his own proposal, not mine, $33.5 billion, billion with a B. That's way more than twice our entire annual state budget, just to breach 4 dams. That kind of proposal to me just shows this is a guy who has lost touch with the reality of how much money means or represents or is. He sits on 3 appropriations committees. One of them he chairs, subcommittees, and I think that after 27 years, money just is not a really meaningful thing. It's just a few billion here, a few billion there, whatever. To me, this is a huge and super significant concern. This shows that this man is no longer grounded in reality. That $33.5 billion, no doubt, if it ever were voted into law, which I don't think it ever will be, hopefully not, but if it ever were, that would just add $33.5 billion to our national debt. I have no doubt about that. There wouldn't be any offsetting, revenue enhancement mechanism. So he's a person that spends a lot of money that is not his money, and that is just always a bad thing. So I am the opposite of that. If you want somebody in the House who is not going to do that, I'm your man. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for listening to both of us.
All right, thank you. And again, another round of applause while Doug comes up.
Okay, again, let's give them a great big hand, for being here. And let's give Jolene a big hand for helping. A comment that I want to make, and Perry mentioned it, is, and this is where we do things a little bit different. We let you ask the questions. Jolene calls it this, Stand Up for Idaho is audience driven. They've never seen any of your questions and all this. I don't know what you're going to say, but this is your chance to actually hold them accountable. And actually, you had some really good, challenging questions. A lot of times, you'll go to a debate or a forum or something, and a moderator gets the questions. And actually, when that happens, in my mind, several things happen. The moderator can censor it, maybe not understand what you're saying, say it their own way. They can decide not to ask that question. There's just a lot of things. One thing that the moderator will never be able to do is to stand there and look at the person and have the emotion and the look in your eye about why is that question important to you. Okay, and in my mind, that is extremely important. And that's why I would encourage everybody to come to Stand Up for Idaho, because that's what we're about. And and I'm going to bring us back to what we started out this evening and what's on this new 50-cent piece. Okay, knowledge is the only guardian to true liberty. And that means a lot. It really is. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to who's running in your districts, and you should know who they are. And all I have to say, shame on you for not, because the election is just a couple of weeks away. Okay, we all need to understand. We all need to pay attention. There are a lot of things happening in our lives these days. More than just who's being elected, who's up for election. A lot of stuff. And the things that are going on, the crosshatches in the sky, what's that doing to you? The chemicals that they put on your, that they spray on your lawn, that they spray on the fields. The immunity that is given to big corporations means that they can cause you harm and have no repercussion. That includes, chemical companies, pharmaceuticals, all of these things. When you talk about liberty, and I was just trying to think, a lot of us think about liberty as my right to do this or that. Well, it goes beyond that. Somebody can affect your health. That will affect you. Somebody can affect your family. Somebody can do certain things to affect your children. That's all part of us as individuals. And to me, that's what liberty is. It's not just I have the right to do this or the right to do that. I'm a sovereign individual, and I do have the right to do certain things. The right to protect myself, the right to defend myself, the right to defend my family in almost any means necessary. The gentleman who was at Stand Up for Idaho a few weeks ago, I guess it was, and says, a badger, I think he was talking about badger, doesn't ask you if he can protect himself. Go talk to a badger, okay, over a wolverine. I can guarantee you they're going to protect themselves and not ask you permission. That's how we are. Anyway, knowledge is the only guardian for true liberty. And that's knowledge about everything that's going on around you. I was talking to a gentleman the other day and asked him a couple of questions. And he admitted that he had his head in the sand. And that he needed to pull his head out of the sand. We need to do that, folks. Your lives depend on it. Your children's, your grandchildren's, future generations. And a lot more things than just who wants to be elected for the next position. And on that, come again next week. We're going to have a meet and greet for a bunch of the local representatives that are here in Idaho Falls, in Bonneville County, I should say. And it's an opportunity to actually sit down and talk to them one-on-one. Okay, we'll give them one last chance, basically, to say why they're wonderful and why you should vote for them. And then you can talk to them individually. And remember, the week after that, don't forget to vote. And with that, everybody, thank you so much. We'll be back here next year. Next week again. Next year, who knows where we'll be. And I do want to say one other thing again. I want to make a big thank and a shout out to David and Tara and Taylor Rail of the Snake River Event Center. This is actually their equipment, their camera and everything that they loaned us to use this, because they had it. I never bought one. Now I'm in a crunch, and they said, Doug, you can use it. So I want everybody to give them a big hand. I really appreciate them. And give Jolene a big hand, and KID for putting up with us and all that. And so everybody, we'll see you next week. And tell everybody they actually need to be here, because you do make a difference. Thank you so much. Be safe going home. Take care. Thank you.